And it's showtime. Welcome back, everybody, to the Zodcast. The Zodcast is back with you. And see, I didn't even need notes tonight because you're already giving me good material here. Of course, we created a new monster with you, Lisa. Now you're going to move from Cooper after, of course, before you were a Finster, and now we got you hooked on Zodiac, which is good. So, of course, Lisa's a long time member of the Braden fan club. So, we're gonna allow her into the Zodiac Club, into the Comdrune, as we call it. So welcome Lisa to the Comdrune and the Zodcast, which we talk about, all things here, mostly Zodiac, but we'll, of course, cover uh Braden Cooper, Yuba County 5. Anything else that comes up is fair game. So ask away any questions. Yes, the 1978 Zodiac letter. I don't know who that got sent to. Where's Richard Goodell? I know he'll watch this later, but I don't know who the 78 letter was sent to. Of course, the 78 letter was never considered a verified 100% Zodiac letter. Of course, the last one they consider authentic was the 1974 Exorcist letter. And I think there was at least one handwriting expert that thought the 78 letter was authentic, but I think three said that they thought that it was a forgery, as Chris said. And I don't know if it ever got vetted out. No, Big B Art, no Yuba County 5 News to speak of. Of course, we're always working on that, and we have like our little group that is constantly vetting anything that we can dig up. So I think we're coming up with some different theories, and I think we're starting to gel around what happened with the Yuba County 5. Hey Darnell, I took your advice, Darnell. I remember to put the hashtags in, so that always helps. Yes, Patty. Overture, curtain lights, action. It's DrewTube. I don't know. I know. I think it was sent to the Chronicle, but I don't think it was sent to a particular reporter. It definitely wasn't sent to what's his name. Of course, yeah, Avery was long gone, but it wasn't sent to Jennings either. You heard a rumor. I found something about Braden. So I guess I cannot confirm or deny that. But weird how things could maybe get out, but I cannot confirm or deny that. Uh, so I'm gonna have to pass on that. Hey Kelly, how are you? Good seeing you. Hey Chris, make sure I didn't miss. Hey Jay, where is Captain J? I saw Captain J left a comment over on Pat Brown's Zodiac Killer videos. Go check that out. She did a couple recently. The profiler Pat Brown. A friend of mine kind of turned me on to Pat Brown. She's pretty good. I think she leans towards Arthur Lee Allen, which is good. I mean, she doesn't know everything about the Zodiac case, but at least she realizes that there's so much good circumstantial evidence for Arthur Lee Allen. It's a good way to go, and I think she kind of goes there. I mean, she was talking about this last one with the Rorschach test and the Zodiac watch, and of course, I saw somebody making this comment earlier. There was ads for the Zodiac watches and people could have seen it everywhere. That's true, but the most logical place that it comes from is Arthur Lee Allen's watch. Yeah, she's good. She's good. She had a lot of good comments on the case, and I agreed with a lot of things she said. She, definitely seems to be a good Allen supporter. So I think Captain J put on there to go for her to go look into Cheney a little more. Maybe she'll read her comments and check out Don Cheney. I put one on there as too. I know Lisa, you saw that video that Pat Brown put out about Allen, and it's pretty good. I mean, one thing she probably doesn't know well enough is the easiest way to take Allen out. The two biggest strikes against Allen is being a lone Zodiac. First of all, you have Lake Berryessa, and this is just I think it's something that the Zodiac never wanted to get out was the fact that both Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard could see the hair coming through the eyelets of the executioner mask that the Zodiac was wearing at Lake Berryessa. I think that's something that he didn't plan on. So with Allen, not only you have to if you have Allen as the attacker at Berryessa, just talking about the hair coming through the eyelets. This wasn't just one or two saying it. Of course, Cecilia lived for I think a day and a half or 2 days after the attack until she finally passed away at Queen of the Valley Hospital. But she said she saw the brown hair, and when it was brown coming through the eyelets of the mask, and Brian said the same thing. He saw the hair long enough in the middle to come through the eyelets of that mask. So, of course, Allen was pretty much not completely bald, but mostly bald. And Allen was never known to grow the hair out on his sides long enough to have done that, which would look ridiculous. He was never known to do that. So here's, the assumptions you have to make that Allen was wearing a wig. And not only would he had to have been wearing a wig, it would had to have been a wig that had hair long enough to come through the eyelets of that mask. I mean, that would have to be like a women's wig. What wig would you go get? If he's hiding the fact that he's bald, he's going to go get a wig that's got long hair going everywhere when he's going to go kill two people with a knife. It's ridiculous. Okay. The Zodiac did not plan on that little fact getting out. I think it was one of the biggest slips was the fact that both Brian and Cecilia saw the hair coming through the eyelets. Say this a million times. No way that attacker is going to be wearing a wig under a hood. He doesn't need a wig when your head and face are covered. You don't need it. That hood, that wig would have shifted if he got in any kind of fight. So that's one thing she needs to realize. You have a really tough time getting Allen at Berryessa. Another reason is Allen didn't move around so well in 1969. We know there was a long walk down to where Brian and Cecilia were from where Brian's Carmen Gia was parked. And as Brian says, and this is the Zodiac speaking documentary when they, Cecilia sees, the Zodiac off in a way, and then he puts on the hood and he starts coming. When Brian first starts seeing him, he's walking at him briskly. He's briskly walking. He's not running, but he's briskly walking towards Brian and Cecilia there on the shore of Lake Berryessa. So that is just not Arthur Lee Allen. He didn't walking briskly anywhere in 1969. So lots of things against Allen being the attacker at Berryessa. And of course, the Presidio Heights attack of Paul Stein. You had Donald Falk saying that the person, when they showed him pictures of Allen, of course, Bauer really wanted it to be Allen. And Falk said, the guy he saw was not near as heavy as Allen. And Allen was probably north of 250 in October of 1969 when the Robbins kids saw the Zodiac wiping down the cab after he killed Paul Stein. So we know that that's two big strikes against Allen at Berryessa and at the Presidio. He was just too heavy. He was too bald. Of course, you have the crew cut picture and the sketch from the Presidio. And so Allen would be wearing a wig there at the Presidio too, and he was going to get a wig that was in the style of a widow's peak, where it's balding right here and there's some hair down the middle, like someone else we know. He's going to be that smart to go get a wig that's already fashioned as a widow's peak. Come on. So that's just, two things. Yes, does Allen have some things to do with this case? Absolutely. And that's where all that good circumstantial evidence comes from. But that's you don't have Allen as the attacker at those two. Was he along at Lake Herman Road? Maybe. You had the one shell casing, could have been from, a second shooter at Lake Herman Road. Maybe he's a ride along for Blue Rock Springs. It's definitely possible. Yes, he did say that. He did say he can change his appearance when he does his thing, but he didn't need to do his thing at Lake Berryessa. He's already covered his entire face with that hood and head with that black hood. You don't need a wig under a hood. Insanity. And also going back to Berryessa, I found this. This was just an old printout. It was from the Journal of Forensic Investigation, and it's talking about the shoe print or the casting from the shoe left. Of course, it was a 10.5 size Wingwalker shoe that Hal Snook found the footprints, and they were going from Brian Hartnell's Carmen Gia down to where Brian and Cecilia were. So they were all pretty confident, or at least Snook was, that was the attacker, the Zodiac's footprint. It says Journal of Forensic Investigation. Snook documented a 13-inch shoe, page 2 of the Lake Berryessa report. And understanding that everyone is different, forensic investigators have an algorithm to estimate height based on a shoe print, a median. A 13-inch shoe is consistent with somebody that is 6'1". So if you believe that shoe print of the Wingwalker belonged to your suspect, and he's Larry Kane down there at 5'7" or so, that's you have to say that he's wearing clown shoes, and he never thought they would get that. So of course, Shane and Allen are both 6 feet tall, so that's right in line with that. But I thought I need to go back and find that original report because it's in the Journal of Forensic Investigation. It's just something I saved that I ran across that was interesting, and I think he also took a casting of that and I think tried to determine a weight, which was around like 225. I'm not sure about that. Hey, Chris, ALA had gout. Yeah, that Cheney's the one that said that too, which is interesting. Cheney is one that was saying that Allen had gout in at least one of his feet, and he couldn't walk that well. So, heck no, if he has gout, is he going to be walking briskly towards 6'7" Brian Hartnell? There's just no way. There's just no way. But it's interesting that Cheney would say that, knowing that it makes Allen less of a suspect, just like he says that he doesn't jump in on Allen liking cryptography or ciphers. I mean, if it's Cheney's whole goal is to frame Allen, why wouldn't he jump all over that when he's asked, "Hey, did Allen like ciphers or puzzles or cryptograms?" And Cheney says, "No, he didn't. I never knew him to like puzzles or anything." Why would he not jump all over that? If his whole goal is to get revenge for his daughter or seeing Allen go to jail, why would he not? If he's lying about everything else, why doesn't he jump on that when he's asked if Allen liked things like the opera or the Mikado? Why didn't Cheney say, "Hell yeah, all he talked about was the Mikado"? All day long he was singing verses, "Tit Willow," everywhere we went. He just would never shut up about this play called the Mikado. No, Cheney doesn't jump on that at all. He says, "No, I like things like that, but Arthur, Lee likes stuff like Hustler magazine and Mad magazine. He wasn't into stuff like the opera. So if he was all trying to like frame Allen, why didn't he jump on those things? Because he didn't want Allen to go to prison. He only wanted Allen as a vehicle to insert himself into the case he created. Let me read these. Here's some good comments I don't want to miss. That's a big problem with Allen's involvement. Everything else for me always lined up. Yes, that's true. Some of his students claimed Allen used to say the phrase "Titwillow," which is quoted by the Zodiac. That's true, and I remember it came out in one. I can't remember the name of the publication. I've written about it, but there was a lady that said that he used to say "Titwillow." He'd get exasperated in class, and he'd say "Titwillow, Titwillow, Titwillow." Of course, from the Mikado. And when that lady was pressed about it, she would never give her real name. She said she wouldn't out of fear and blah blah blah. So the claim that Allen would say Titwillow when he was a school teacher, of course, this predates Lake Herman Road. This is, I assume, Valley, when he taught at Valley Springs Elementary. That it's not credible. It just isn't. There's no credible account of Allen ever quoting the Mikado. And I say that as somebody saying that Allen has involvement. So for me, with Cheney or not, it doesn't help or hurt my case. But there's nothing credible that Allen ever did that. And of course, who else said that he did that? Well, it was one of the Seawaters said that he used to do that. So it's kind of interesting. The Seawaters took their website down. I don't know why. But going back to the Seawaters, when they had their YouTube channel up, and I have no idea why they pulled it down, but they showed that film footage they had of Allen, I think in 62 or 63, of one of it was Allen's car at the time. It wasn't his Carmen Gia. It was his Austin. I believe it was his Austin Healy. I think it was a white Austin Healy, because Allen liked, sports cars like that. He liked sports car races, but they have that film footage from 62, and Allen is huge. I mean, he is so big around his waist. Nobody's going to miss that. And I mean, when you see him in videos later, it's because he was on dialysis. He had a lot of health problems. And yes, he lost weight because he was ill he died in 92, pretty at a young age, pretty young age. So, but in 68 and 9, he was not sick yet. He was not losing that kind of weight. And he looks huge in that footage that the Seawaters put out. So that was really kind of, they want to promote Allen as the lone Zodiac, and they actually really hurt their case by showing that film, because I've got screenshots of it. I wish I could put it up. He's massive around the midsection. I'd say he's got to be 275 easy when they filmed that. Hey, Bible group. Yeah, I wanted to talk about that, Tyler. So what do you guys think about the fingerprint news over on whatever that channel is? I never thought they were Zodiac's fingerprints on Paul Stein's cab. I've said that for a long, long time. I know a lot of people bet their lives on it, and I've seen how that works. I remember somebody wanted to bet their life about how that John Cheney was taller than 6 feet tall. So I guess he lost his life. He would bet his life that Cheney was taller than 6 feet. So don't ever bet your life, because you could be wrong. But I have always said that I didn't think that the Zodiac would have been clumsy enough to have left his fingerprints on that cab. Of course, Lindsey Robbins saw him wiping it down, so everybody just assumes, well, he's hiding his fingerprints. Who knows? Of course, Zodiac, if you want to believe him, said he was leaving fake clues. Who knows? But I agree with Brian Hartnell, who is a victim and a smart guy, an attorney, wrote in Riverside Lawyer magazine that he does not think the Zodiac would have been dumb enough to leave his fingerprints anywhere. So I'm in good company with Brian Hartnell on that. Never thought he would have done it. So, I know that Lindsey Robbins passed away about 5 years ago, pretty young. He was early 60s. I don't know if he was ill or what. His mother passed away pretty recently, I think maybe a year ago, and they're a pretty wealthy family. I don't know where it came from. Maybe Lindsay's father, but they owned that place in the Presidio. His mother was something of a socialite. So the whole story about him telling his son Patrick that, after he's dead for 2 years, and then after his mother dies, which I think was about maybe a year ago, not too often, that you could tell the story about how Lindsay left the house that night at the Presidio and went down there to try to help Paul Stein up. I don't know if that, who knows, maybe if that's true or not, but it's interesting if it is. Uh, like maybe he got scared and didn't want to tell the police that he went down there trying to help Stein, but Stein must have been covered in blood. I mean, it was blood everywhere. So if he did that, he would have had to have gone back and changed, because then the police would have noticed when they questioned him or they got the description and everything that he had blood all over him. Do his siblings remember? I mean, to make that credible, I think that Patrick Robbins has to come out. And I know he exists, and he is still living in the San Francisco area. He's got a brother named Paris, a younger brother, and then they have a sister too, I believe, a younger sister. But I know there's Patrick Robbins, Paris Robbins, still in the San Francisco area. If that's true, just come out and say it. I mean, why not? So I think until he confirms that's true or not, I don't know. But but either way, I never thought he left his fingerprints. Didn't a witness driving by the Zodiac at Blue Rock or Lake Herman say they saw two people in the Zodiac car? No, I've never seen that. Never heard of that, Craig. Could be true. Richard, if you watch this later, drop it in the comments because Richard would know. Why do you think the costume just once, or did anyone else ever see that? No one else ever saw the costume except for Brian and Cecilia. And if it weren't for Brian surviving, we would have never known about the costume. Of course, that reminds me, Darnell sent me a video. I need to put it in the comment section of a guy making a Zodiac costume, and it's really creepy. I mean, not many people watch this video. Darnell sent me the link, and I'll put it in there. This guy's making his own Zodiac executioner hood, and he's trying to make it just like the one from Lake Berryessa. And he shows how he makes it. He does a really good job, other than the cross circle logo. It looks like he did just scrawl paint on it. He didn't stitch it or anything, but the construction of the part over the head and it coming down over the front, looks like he did a pretty good job. And thanks, Darnell, for sending me that. I want to put it on there. So Darnell found a pretty cool video. I don't know who this guy is. I mean, it's not like a Zodiac channel, but it was just a guy wanting to make the hood, and Darnell found it, which was actually pretty good. Yeah. So I if he did it at Lake Herman Road, we wouldn't know because there's no witnesses to that. But Mike Michaud never reported him wearing anything like that, and of course, he wasn't in the Presidio. All right, Lisa. Don Cheney was a confidential source for the investigators that met with him in Torrance. Yeah, that I'm glad you said that. That met with him in Torrance in mid-July of 71. Arthur Lee Allen did not know that Don Cheney dropped a dime on him. No, he didn't know. And if he did, he wasn't telling anybody. But it's interesting that Don Cheney was never really very worried that they were going to catch the real Zodiac, was he? Kind of like O.J. Simpson. O.J. was never really worried that the real killer of Ron and Nicole was going to be found. Just like Don was never worried the real Zodiac was going to come out, and he's going to have to explain that it was Phil Davis from, another part of California that was proven to never known Arthur Lee Allen. He would have had a real problem with that. So these are sections from Zodiac Unmasked. Of course, that's Graysmith's second book. And my friend, good mate in the UK, Neil Arnold, sent to me these things that it's been a while since I even looked at this book, but these are some good excerpts from Zodiac Unmasked. Remember, it's Graysmith. It's Graysmithing. You got to take it all with a little um, a grain of salt. But it says in the late 1980s. He and his dad visited Alan's house on Fresno Street. Alan claimed he didn't know who had turned him in to the police. Craig told him it was Cheney. I'm very disturbed at that. I'm very disturbed at the thought of that, Lee replied. Don Cheney is capable of perpetuating these crimes and even frightens me. Don had a terrible temper. He seemed to be speaking for Zodiac, Craig said later. He's talking about Alan. He claimed that he was the one that created the Zodiac codes, or at least the codes were inspired by him. He showed us his own code, which is the one he apparently showed Ron Allen's wife. He he had others that were different from what Ron Allen's wife saw. Craig recognized a lot of the symbols as being zodiacs. Allen told him that the zodiac cipher had been in his possession, were the original work of a convicted murderer that he met at Tascadero. We know the rest of that story, but that's an interesting comment that Allen says he's disturbed at the thought that it was Cheney and that Cheney was capable of the crimes. Lots of good stuff when you go back and read Zodiac Unmasked, but just remember that it's Graysmith. Touch DNA from envelopes, letters, clothesline rope, or maybe the watch from the Bates murder are the best chances for suspect ID. Still, how did they not get DNA from underneath her fingernails? From Bates, which I don't think is Zodiac. I really don't. I'm kind of in agreement with Riverside PD that was her boyfriend, and we know who that is, and he is still living. They're convinced of it, even though his DNA was negative against what they have. But I remember when Ken Maines was talking about it because he got to like to see the physical evidence from the Sherry Joe Bates crime, and it was hairs in the web of her hand that they had the DNA from. It wasn't from under her fingernails. I wish if Ross is on here, clear me up on that, Ross. Was it under her fingernails or was it the hairs in the web of her hand that they found? Because the way Maines explains it was from hairs that they found. Like she put up a really good fight, and that's where that DNA came from for Sherry Joe Bates. But if they ever did have Zodiac DNA, which they claim the best sample came from the 78 letter that Lisa was talking about, wouldn't you immediately test it against what Riverside has from the hairs or underneath their nails? That's never been done. And if it has been, no one's ever said a word about it. So why wouldn't they do that? Number one, you could at least unequivocally prove that if a Zodiac letter tied to the DNA from the Bates crime, I would go ahead and accept Bates as a Zodiac crime. No problem at all. But they just don't have it. Now, when you talk about the bindings from Lake Berryessa, the only thing Zodiac left behind, there's photographs of the Napa police people holding them with their bare hands. So whose touch DNA are you going to get? Anybody that came in possession with it. And it's like I said, the San Francisco Police Department, the way they stored their stuff was abysmal. I mean, people took it home to their families to gawk at. So, the police that had access to the letters that were housed by the crime lab at SFED literally took the letters home to let their family members touch and feel and say, "Ooh, it's the Zodiac," because there's so much mistake. There was so much mystique around the case. So they had been handled multiple times. Um, there's really just not any kind of a great place to try to find it. Of course, Vallejo sent their letters in for testing, which we hope were stored a little bit better than SFPD, and nothing's ever come back from that. And now it's been 5 years, so not much hope. Hey, Sepher. Yeah, that's what we were talking about. I don't know. I like I said, I think it's interesting. Could be true. If I think Patrick Robbins should at least make a statement about it. I don't see what he's got to lose. I don't think he'd be doing it for money. I think that all the Robbins have done pretty well. The grandmother just passed away not long ago. She was some kind of socialite in San Francisco. I think they have a lot of money from somewhere. I mean, if you were living in the Presidio at any point and you own the actual building, you got a lot of money. I mean, I can't imagine what like just the building that the Robbins kids were in back in the time, what that's worth now. I mean, I know that values have fluctuated, but that part of San Francisco, I could imagine that would just be worth a absolute fortune. Let me go down. I saw her question. I don't know, Lisa. I don't know. I wish I did. They claim Allen was a 10.5. There's no proof he ever owned wing walkers. And if he had gout, he sure wasn't wearing a wing walker. Cheney was 6 feet tall. You know, I don't know. Whatever, 6 feet tall. No, I don't. I know his height for sure. I don't know shoe size. I wish they had that on his DDR, but they didn't. Hey Chris, Cheney created a buffer insulating himself and used ALA in that approach. That's a great way of saying it. Hey, Bible group. No, this is my new green screen I was playing with. I was gonna use this one for Jimmy Church's show. And if everybody, I don't know if you checked it out, I put a link in this for Jimmy's show where we talked about Cooper, we talked about Zodiac, and of course Yuba County 5. Appreciate Jimmy having me on. But yeah, if y'all haven't seen that show, go check out um over Jimmy Church's show, Fade to Black. There's a link there and hit like on the video. That would help me out tremendously. Hey, Captain J. Yeah, thanks for leaving that comment over there on Pat's channel. Hopefully she'll look at that. I think I said something like briefly to her on the other Zodiac video she did a few days ago, and she acknowledged that. She said, yeah, I've heard people say that it's Allen and Cheney, or there's something like that. I didn't push it any further, but hopefully she reads the comment you left for her. ALA knew in 1991 that it was Don Cheney. ALA said that Cheney made the story sound grander than it actually was. Yes, that's true. I don't know what you're talking about, Lisa. What are you talking about? True. Bat Falcon, you missed the beginning. Yes. Zodiac, very careful not leaving any clues behind. Why would you play all those games with encryption to be dumb enough to leave a fingerprint on a bloody cab or a payphone? You're gonna play all these games with encryption and make the 340 cipher that took over 50 years to break. Three extremely smart guys, a computer scientist, a mathematician, and a cipher expert, and and a computer program, and some luck to break that 340. Took that long, but he's gonna leave a fingerprint? No way. Never bought that. But, they should. I mean, I don't know if Lindsey Robbins was ever in the military or ever got arrested, but maybe his fingerprints are on file, and they could actually go check that out, but they won't. The San Francisco Police Department doesn't have a whole lot of interest in solving this case. If you found something just so stunning they couldn't ignore it, maybe they would, but they're just, um, I know some ex-SFPD guys that give me some inside stuff, and it's not at the top of their list. It's not at the top of the FBI's list, which reminds me of the case breakers and all their breaking announcements. And what is this nonsense with the FBI whistleblower claim that I'm reading this from? I had this for Jimmy show. That does it say the nonprofit led by investigative journalist Thomas Colbert alleged that deceased Air Force veteran Post is currently listed as a suspect. They claim that an FBI whistleblower confirmed that labs have a partial DNA sample that connects him to the string of murders. It's Gary Post with this. Look, I've got scars on my forehead. Look, I didn't know that. I've got scars on my forehead. I must be the Zodiac, the whistleblower. Who's the whistleblower? Notice how they'll never give a name for any of this nonsense. But the lay person is going to read these headlines. Of course, Colbert worked for, I think it was CBS in LA for years and years as a researcher, putting together shows. He knows how to get his media out there. He knows how to get it to Fox. He knows how to get it to Daily Mail with all these crazy headlines. And lay people that are kind of like have a mild interest maybe in Zodiac, read that. They believe, oh, it looks good to me. Move on. Next one. It's like I said, their whole motto should be solving the Zodiac Killer case for people who really don't care who the Zodiac Killer is. That's the case breakers. I mean, somebody recently wanted me to write a short article about that whole phenomenon with them and how that affects the case. I'm like, the joke is it gets solved 4 times a year, and it's because people like that, with these ridiculous headlines. But I guess, go ask your Alexa who the top suspect in the Zodiac killings is, and it's going to say Arthur Lee Allen still. So, sorry, Thomas Colbert, you have not unseated the great Arthur Lee Allen yet. Despite the DNA, despite the witness descriptions, Arthur Lee Allen has not been dethroned yet, is the prime suspect in this case, and for good reason. Yes, I agree with that, Spencer. We should make another, I mean, a big push to get the cutting room footage from Fincher's film and from from his name was Arthur Lee Allen. That's what you mean. Yeah. I mean, it came out with the Fincher film. Yes, you're talking about the cutting room floor stuff of his name was Arthur Lee Allen because that's the only one that Cheney participated in. And I would love to have those outtakes. I would do any, I mean, just show me where to sign up. I'll go wash dishes for that because I know they've got it. I have emailed them, but there's got to be a way. Like if I wonder if like a TV show got. I mean, even if a TV show got involved, would could they get it? Something really big. I mean, someone like Fincher when they did that, that was so big. That's the only reason Brian Hartnell agreed to do it because it was David Fincher and Hartnell's son knew who that was. He was like, "Dad, I know you don't do any interviews, but this guy's big." That's what got Brian involved in the film. But I wonder who could behoove the people to release that footage. I mean, you got to think that if Cheney was on there for however many minutes he talks in that video, 10, maybe not, probably not even 10, probably 8 minutes of actual speaking time in that documentary, how much cutting room floor stuff they'd have to have. They'd have to have at least, I'd say at least 10 times that. And who knows what he says? I mean, he could, I don't know. I want it bad. I wish if they're listening, I want that footage. Yeah. Spencer's 100% right about that. Yeah, Brian. He says it was in the web of her hand. It was hair, like a clump of hairs or something. I've seen under the nails too, but I know Maine saw it, and Maine says it was hairs that were in the web of her right hand. I believe is where they got that DNA. Armand Placetti, of course, he was Falk's partner, stated saying that while he was talking to Falk on the night of the Stein murder, Falk and Zelm stopped the Zodiac and talked to him. Falk, although denies that. I've heard that before, and a lot of people told me that, and including an ex SFPD officer, that Falk was scared to death. Like he was really scared of the whole thing. He saw Zodiac. They said he was, I think, maybe worried for his life or something, and that kind of explained why he, was a little hesitant at first and denied certain things. But most people seem to principally accept that Falk did see him that night in the Presidio. But I guess some people could deny it, but uh, he acts pretty confident. He said he wrote his scratch and that he saw, of course, that's where you get the shuffling loop from, where people think he had a limp or something. And then, of course, Falk said that, of course, later said that he saw a widow's peak. He used the term engineer shoes, which is interesting because I know who an engineer was, but he used the term engineer shoes, which actually, if you look up engineering shoes, they look a lot like wing walkers. Hey, I'm not Paul. Yeah, that's how Don Cheney was able to manipulate ALA. Cheney didn't want to get busted, so he dropped the dime on ALA by surprise. True. By the time ALA realized it, he had the SFPD on him. True. And I think he probably knew that it wouldn't have taken much for Allen to go down. Not much at all. One shell casing might have been all it would have taken at that point because Allen had him so interested. And this isn't just like Cheney came along, told him about Allen and some interesting things about Allen. They asked other people about him. They asked Phil Tucker, who saw the ciphers in the little gray box with his wife, who saw the ciphers that Allen was in possession of, and said, "Hey, I'm interested in that. Can I borrow it? Can I?" And Allen said, "Oh, later, not now. I'll let you do it later." I mean, that's that whole story that, they interviewed Bill Tucker and his wife. They said they both saw the ciphers and the cipher symbols in the gray box. Yeah, he slipped up a lot of times. He slipped up a whole lot of times. Like, what's the, I was trying to think about this the other day, Captain J. How many times? I mean, it's, maybe he didn't slip up. Maybe he wanted to throw those clues out there. You know, at that point, he was probably like, "Catch me if you can. I'm just going to taunt you." I think he really did. I think he slipped up intentionally. I think that was it. That was his game. Of course, the main thing was his timeline getting changed, which he's got to stick to. 69 now on New Year's Day. He can't go back. He's locked into that date, so he can't go back. So I think his biggest almost slip, of course, is his name was Arthur Lee Allen when he's talking about Lake Herman Road, and it hits him that that crime's already happened. When he talks about Allen taking him to Blue Rock Springs, then taking him to Lake Herman Road to drive through there to show what he'd like to do to some girl there, and it's not pretty. But Cheney catches himself. He's like, "Wait a minute." Lake Herman Road's already happened. So he's got to describe how Allen wanted to linger there. And I started thinking what he was telling me had already happened. You know, what nonsense. But I actually think that wasn't planned. I think that's Cheney thinking on his feet. He realizes he's telling that story and he's got to correct himself now because this is all happening when January 1st, 1969, and it hits him. Wait a minute, because he's the actual killer that it happened on December 20th of 1968. So he's got to cover it. So he tells this, just think out what nonsense that is. What Allen, he goes from present tense into past tense. That's ridiculous. So Allen's going to take him where he just killed two people 11 days earlier, right? There's going to be no chalk, nothing on the ground, no flowers, nothing. No, Cheney didn't see it in the newspaper that two young kids were killed at Lake Herman Road on December 20th of 68. He's only there 11 days after. What nonsense. But I actually think that that's Cheney just thinking on his feet. He has to cover now because he realizes, wait a minute, I'm telling this story about Allen taking me to the crime scenes on New Year's Day 69, but Lake Herman Road's already happened and he's got to pivot quickly. So watch that moment. And his name was Arthur Lee Allen. That's a really, he's got to cover because it was his original date was New Year's Day 68. Well, hell, anything goes then because nothing's happened yet. But yeah, he slips up many times in both interviews. He slips up many times. Says in the Void interview, never heard of Blue Rock Springs. Tells him in sec, I've never heard of Blue Rock Springs Park. What is that? But yet, in his name was Arthur Lee Allen. He knows all about Blue Rock Springs. Suddenly, his memory's getting better. That's just one of the many ways that he screws up. There's good stuff on that. Now you just reminded me of this, Lisa. So there's these other excerpts that Neil sent me. Here's one that says, in the late 1980s, he and his dad visited Allen's house. I don't remember who these people are. Allen claimed he didn't know who had turned him in. Okay, I already read that one. A month later, Gain requested behavioral science unit at Quantico review the letter's contents and develop a psychological profile of Zodiac. Later, I called to see if Cheney ever wrote any letters to Lee Allen. I couldn't help but notice that your printing resembles Zodiac printing, I said. Could Zodiac be copying your handprinting? He's talking about Cheney. I mean, people noticed even before he wrote the letter to Voight that Cheney had similar handwriting to the Zodiac, and he still flies under the radar. It's ridiculous how this guy was just flaunting it. Before changing to permit microfilm, upper and lowercase lettering was standard drafting practice. Cheney, an engineer, referred me to technical drawing, and he gives the names of the authors of that particular book. So Cheney's telling you again how he did this. He's talking about his handwriting. Of course, the ciphers were done on graph paper. Cheney's even telling you the name of the book under the guise of what? Allen did it, but I'm telling you how he could have done it. This is ridiculous. I mean, this is a great example. Thanks for sending it, Neil. I mean, it mentions Cheney's an engineer. He's a draftsman, and it gives you the name of the book that teaches you how to do this particular drafting about the upper and lowercase lettering, And he goes, thought I never got a letter from him with double postage, he said. Lee typed his letters and recipes, misspelling certain words on purpose. Of course, he throws out that little piece to keep you on Allen. Look over here. Allen misspelled words for comedic effect, just like Zodiac. Don't think about me being the mechanical engineer that knows how to draft and line up cipher symbols and knows the math behind it all. No. Look over here at the child molesting Lee. Don't look at me. That's a great example, Neil. Thanks for sending that. That's a prime example of I'm telling you how I did it. And here's another one. Thursday, September 7th. This is from Grace Smith's Zodiac Unmasked. There was a second meeting with investigators. Panzarella told me Lee was then living in a house trailer somewhere on the coast, and I had been there. The most bizarre thing is that hanging on the wall was a picture of him buffed out. a senior in high school, winning the CIA diving championship. I don't know what that's not the CIA, it's a whatever. I think he's with Vallejo Plunge. And this guy's totally healthy looking. Only 7 or 8 years later, he's a 300-pound blob. Talking about Allen. At the time of the murders, he's already gotten huge. I mean, that's like how he looks in that 62 film. Allen's way too big to be the Zodiac. From any witness description, he's simply too heavy. Bill Armstrong contacted John Cheney in Torrance again. A year had now snaked by since he and Toschi had questioned Lee Allen. So many homicides, so many suspects, so many legal hurdles to clear. Inspector, I was going to call you, Cheney said. I don't know if it's important, but I thought of something else Arthur Lee Allen and I discussed in our conversation on New Year's Day, 1969. Remember, we moved it up a year when Lee was discussing his plan. Isn't it always funny how Don always remembers something later that he's got to add because he created this. He can't help himself. He keeps, he wants the attention. He can't just say, hey, this is everything that Alan told me on New Year's Day, 68 or 69, whatever date you want to go with. He's got to come up with something more later because he can't stand it not being in the spotlight. He cannot stand not talking to these police that are investigating this case, keeping them running around in circles, just like someone else did, the Zodiac. That's what Don did. He liked keeping them, jerking them around and remembering, oh, I forgot one more little piece. I forgot to tell you. He's always got one more little thing where they got to come rushing back. What is it, Don? What do you have for us? Including Gray Smith, of course, that, the goose that laid the golden egg for Gray Smith. It says, but I thought of something else Arthur Lee Allen and I discussed in our conversation on New Year's Day, 1969. When Lee was discussing his plan, I recall that he asked me how you could disguise your handwriting. I remember my response. I told him, I guess you could go to a library and get books on writing examination to find out how writing is identified. Armstrong absorbed this, then asked Cheney again if he was certain about his memory of his conversation with Allen. I am positive, he said. Things were moving again. Toschi scanned a photocopy of the first letter signed Zodiac. The dreaded inspired 2 years ago, still fresh in his mind. This is the Zodiac speaking, it began. Zodiac had firmly handprinted these 3 pages 20 months after Allen's conversation with Cheney. Think about that. 20 months. This is the Zodiac speaking. I mean, this shows you none of the times line up at all. 20 months later is when that comes out. After studying the originals and discovering no intended or secret writing, the FBI returned him to Sacramento on August 18, 1969. It just shows you he's running circles around these guys. He's got them so salivating that Allen's a Zodiac that he's able to go in there at will and insert whatever he wants. Any memory, hey, I showed the guy how to do this. He's got him so convinced it's Allen that they can't see the forest for the trees. The kids who witnessed Paul's murder, are they around? Have you or anyone you know interviewed them? Well, that's Stephen. This is what we were talking about earlier, which is over on another channel about how one of the, the main kid, the oldest, was Lindsey Robbins, who died about 5 years ago in his early 60s. But now his son has come out and said that his father told him that after he's dead a certain amount of time, and after his mother, meaning Lindsey's mother, who was an older lady in her 90s, I think she finally passed away, that he could come forward, the son of one of the kids that was at the Presidio that saw him could come forward and tell his story that the night that Stein was shot, that he saw it and he walked down there to the cab and tried to help Stein up because Stein was slumped over. He was already dead. And Lindsey Robbins, the oldest of the teenagers, tried to help him up. Like maybe he was still alive and he was trying to help him. And thus doing so, he was the one that left the fingerprints in the blood on the crossbar of the cab or on the outside of the cab. So that's the latest and greatest on that. If it's true or not, I don't know, but it's an interesting story. I love a story that's, don't tell anyone until we're dead. Stories are great. But yeah, so Lindsey's deceased. Of course, his sons are still alive. I think he had a daughter too. Lindsey Robbins has a sister himself. She, to my knowledge, is still alive. She has not been interviewed. And I don't know if there's another sibling. I know Lindsey Robbins has a sister. God, I can't remember the sister's name. There's 3 of them. that night, but I know that the middle one's still alive, and I think the other 2 are still alive, but Lindsay died in his early 60s. I can't remember the sister's name, it's escaping me. I don't know, according to Bauer, they checked Cheney's prints against, whatever they had, according to Bauer. He didn't think the DNA was ever tested, which is interesting, but he did say that Cheney's fingerprints were compared to what they had on file. Of course, everything they have on file are partials, so who knows? Were they? They were just case breakers were just on with Trey Gowdy? Oh my gosh. They just don't ever give up. Unbelievable. I mean, the lay people just buy this stuff because Colbert would do, he's a TV guy. He'll just sit there and go on and on and on. What a joke. No, I never talked to Cheney in person. I wish I did. I wish I did. I know one lady that knew him pretty well that I got to talk to. Only one. His brother-in-law didn't live real far from me, and I really tried to talk to him. I think his former sister-in-law is still alive and doesn't live real far from me in Texas. But I know his brother-in-law. I would have really loved to talk to him because he's the one that was working with him at Fleur at the time that Cheney claims that he saw the Zodiac letter in the newspaper that talk about picking off the kitties as they come bouncing off the bus. Yes, hairs in Sherry's palm, right? Her right hand, like in the web of her palm. You wouldn't put much merit in the shoe size and type. The killer would know that is easy physical evidence. That's true. A good way to throw off law enforcement. That's true, but I wouldn't think he'd have a foot too much bigger than what the shoe was, if that's his shoe. But yeah, I guess someone with a smaller foot could definitely have worn that. Alexa does say Ayla is a top suspect. I have asked her. Yeah, somebody should have fired that up on Trey Gowdy's show. Why are you behind, Lisa? Yeah, Cheney's fingerprint should be in his military file. Yeah, in his Air Force file. I don't know. I'd love to get his complete military records. All I have is his DDR, but that'd be good. I think the motive for the Zodiac murders was like Leopold and Loeb, the case of Leopold and Loeb. That'd be the closest thing that I would say to an Allen and a Cheney, and so in the infancy stages. I think it was just to see if they could get away with it, just to literally see if they could get away with murder, taunting the police, writing the letters. I think it was just this master plan to jerk the cops around and see how smart they were and get away with it. I think that was it. This is true. In case some people in the chat don't know this for a fact, for the Lake Berryessa murder, Cecilia Shepard did sort of catch a glimpse of the Zodiac's face before he put the hood on. That's true. She could, but the only thing she could ascertain from when she saw him without the hood was that he was white. That is unfortunately the only thing that she could gain from that, because he was, still pretty far away before he approached them. But it is good that she gave it. I think she gave the best description of him in the daylight. Specifically his height and, his weight and things like that. I think she gave a great description as she lay there dying, literally, to Deputy Dave Collins, is who she gave it to. And Collins wrote all those details down that Cecilia gave him. He remembered writing them down immediately so he couldn't forget them, what she said. When he said that I'm 5'10". How tall do you think he was? She said about an inch or two taller than you. Yeah, I go back and forth with that too. I really do. You should watch Richard Grinnell's video. What is it called? I know Richard, you watch it later, but the 10-to-1 ratio or 8 to whatever the name is, it's on Richard Grinnell's YouTube channel about the last shell casing at Lake Herman Road. Yeah, I always kind of feel like it was both of them there, like Allen was a ride along, just enough to get his, to be able to implicate him. Yes. Yeah. Gary Francis Post is terrible. He's terrible. I mean, he's awful. He's the worst. I mean, like Rackstraw is pretty bad, but Rackstraw's not near as bad as for a Cooper suspect as Post is for Zodiac. I mean, at least Rackstraw was looked at by the FBI before Colbert got on his goose hunt with him. You know, of course, the biggest blow against Rackstraw for Cooper is he's too darn young, and he was photographed, 3 or 4 weeks before the hijacking at Disneyland, looking very young, and he wasn't wearing makeup. A 23-year-old flight attendant's going to know if some man is wearing makeup who sat by her for 2.5 hours. It's ridiculous. Um, Gary Post is terrible. Right? It's just they keep getting this media. I mean, and none of these case breakers even have a cursory knowledge of the case. I mean, even Colbert, he doesn't even know the basics. If you sat there and say, "What date was Lakerman Road? What day was Blue Arch?" He doesn't know any of this stuff. I doubt Colbert could even name more than one or two victims, if that. He couldn't, or anybody on that goofy team. They couldn't do it, But they throw all these headlines out there. I mean, at this point, it is doing a lot of damage. I've always said with we Tom's a friend of mine. I always like some of the stuff in it. I think, first thing you point to with the hoax theory is Dennis Land removing the crime scene. Number one, that never made sense to me. Why Dennis Land would remove the blanket with all the items on it. He was a military MP. I think he would have been smart enough not to remove the blanket. I think it's kind of a lot of things that you could base the hoax theory around. Certain things that come up in the letters that maybe could have been leaked, with the slack dress and a lot of that. There's a lot of interesting stuff there. I mean, it really does. There's really, I always thought there was some merit in the hoax theory. I always did. It's probably why we're friends, because I always saw some merit in that. And I thought that Evan from Texas did a lot of good supporting work to the hoax theory. If you ever watch Evan from Texas videos on YouTube, they're really good. Can my theory and Horn's theory ever come together? I don't know. Who knows? But he likes Horn likes a lot of my finds. He was fascinated with the Bakersfield Paul Avery find. He was. He told me, like, wow, I can't believe that Cheney and Avery were going to the same little junior college, because Horn's like I am. We like making connections. So I know he really paid attention when I found that. Yes, the case was a total failure of SFPD Inspector Tosky and Armstrong. Tosky still believes that Arthur Allen is a Zodiac. That's true. A lot of those guys did. Most of those guys believed it was Allen. They could never get off of Allen. They were so fascinated by him. I mean, even though they couldn't close the deal, they probably should have searched the house and the trailer simultaneously. They didn't, but they couldn't close it. But they were convinced. There's just so much around Allen that you can't turn your back on. Circumstantially, the ciphers that Phil Tucker saw, everything that Allen was known to do, misspelling words for comedic effect, which we know now, with Stefan's finding that Zodiac could absolutely spell. We know with that good example that Stefan found, that this wasn't just the guy that was misspelling words. It was because Allen misspelled words. Darnell, it wasn't a hoax. This was obviously planned. The person who did it was very organized. Yes, very organized. He's Zodiac is an organized serial killer. That is the word, Darnell. You got it right. Organized. Not necessarily with the murders themselves, but everything else, like the letters. Yes. I mean, yeah, that's a good point. Yes, the letters very organized. The cipher is very organized. Maybe some of the planning, but yeah, maybe like leaving two of the victims alive. That's probably not what he planned on, for whatever reason. Leaving Brian alive and leaving Mike Mageau alive, probably not. But yeah, he's in the organized category. That's why it's a tremendous blow to a suspect like Ross Sullivan, who was horribly mentally ill and way too big to have been the Zodiac. Didn't the letters for the Riverside murder turn out to be a hoax written and sent by a kid? Yes, not all of them. Of course, you had the I think the Bates had to die was the one that was written by the kid that they did find by DNA from the letter. So they're able to do that on an old letter, but they haven't done that yet with Zodiac, where they have a sample that's so good they can trace the genealogy on, but that's how they found that hoax letter. I think that was I think that was Bates had to die. Letter that they found out the kid had sent, but not the confession. The confession letter was typed, so they don't think that was from the kid, but it was only the one that the Bates had to die that was handwritten was the one that was that did turn out to be a hoax sent by the kid, which definitely made Sherry Joe Bates a lesser possibility of being a Zodiac crime when that was found out. And of course, the kid was I don't know how they ruled it out, but they said there's no way this kid could have been the Zodiac. He was either way too young or they never said who he was, by the way. They never identified who this kid was that admitted to faking that letter. The Lake Berryessa palm print on the Napa car wash payphone was not checked against John Chaney. I don't know. Who knows? If you find it, let me know. I have no idea. I think you're talking about the one that was so fresh they had to they had to like artificially dry it. I still don't think he would have been dumb enough to leave his handprint on a payphone near the police station. I do not think that the Zodiac was that dumb. I haven't seen Stoner's video yet on Missy Beavers. I want to have Ned on. We're going to talk about it. Here's Jimmy. It's Gary Francis Post. Damn it. It's Post. Can't you see the scars? Can't you see the image of Gary Post in the wood? I mean, if that wasn't enough to convince people, nothing is. Or the fact that apparently Post gave away all the guns and ammos to all his buddies up in the mountains somewhere, but the investigators were too tired to go to walk up the mountain to look for the guns and the ammo. They were over 50. Okay, I'm over 50. Okay, I don't think I'm gonna be. I don't know. I think I'd try to find hike up the mountain if I was gonna find the Zodiac's guns and ballistics. I think I'd start finding a way. Apparently the guys that Post gave the guns and the ammo to are up on the mountain. How did they get up there? There's got to be a way up that mountain to get those guns. Got to be. Yeah, he said Zodiac said you've stumbled across my Riverside activity. He said activity. No, Kathleen Johns, 100% not Zodiac, 150% not Zodiac. You heard it here. I'll state it all. I bet all my chips are on the table. Kathleen Johns never encountered the Zodiac. Not at all. Didn't. She made it up, burned her own car out for attention for her boyfriend or whatever. I think she had a lot of problems and she literally just made it up. She really did. Yeah, I want to see that thing. I love them. Missy Beavers is fascinating. Too old to walk up that mountain. They're too old to go up there and find the bullets. But take our word for it that there's a leaker inside the FBI that knows it's Gary Francis Post. I mean, nothing against what he did, but I mean, Post, pretty blue collar guy. I don't see Gary Post sitting there constructing the 340. Could you see? I mean, from what I know about that guy, could you just see Gary Post sitting there and doing what he did to make that thing resist 50 years of attacks and encryption? Gary Francis Post made the 340. If that ever is ever true, I'll eat this microphone if it's ever proven that Gary Post was a Zodiac. Literally, I'm going to make that bet right now, and I'll never bet my life. But if Gary Post is a Zodiac, I'm going to consume this microphone right here. No problem. But yeah, I want to watch Aaron Stoner's video about Missy Beavers. I think that'd be really good. There's plate C. Zodiac letter to Melvin Belli has the front of the house. Yeah, that's true. Had the front of the house number recreated on the envelope, which meant that the Zodiac actually stood by Belli's front door. How's that for creepy? Yes, that's true. And of course, the Belli letter had a piece of Paul Stein's bloody shirt in it. Unlike Lisa, the Zodiac Halloween card, which did not have a piece of Paul Stein's bloody shirt in it. So don't believe everything you see in the movies. Ned said, "Why didn't Zodiac write more murders on the Carmen Gia? Probably not enough room or time, or he didn't kill Dominguez and Edwards." That's a good question. I never heard that. Was that on Ned's last show? I'll have to check it out. That's a good point. Of course, Zodiac never said that. Like when he talks about the slaves in paradise or everything, he never made any reference to other murders other than, of course, Riverside, like my Riverside activity. And of course, he tried to claim Johns as a victim too in one of his letter. He said the lady and her baby he gave a rather interesting ride to. But I think as far as the slaves in paradise, he never made any mention to, like, I don't think Bates would have was even counted in one of his slaves. Maybe he hadn't picked up the Zodiac persona yet. But I don't think Sherry Joe Bates was Zodiac. I really don't. And I absolutely will guarantee you that Kathleen Johns was not Zodiac. That's interesting. I think the writing on the Carmen Gia was done in 2 stages. You think like before and after? I never came in contact with Graysmith. I'd love to talk to him though, or Fincher for that matter. I'd love to. I mean, but who gave Graysmith all their information? Who was the person that gave Robert Graysmith all his interesting tidbits about Arthur Lee Allen? Cheney did. So Graysmith would probably not be real interested in anyone that's going against his goose that laid the golden egg. Of course, Cheney died in 2009, but I don't think Graysmith would be interested in talking to me whatsoever. Yeah, that is a good question. Before and after. Yeah, that's an interesting concept. Yeah, and of course the handwriting looks good. Of course, that's the only time that Zodiac claimed Lake Berryessa, other than the phone call, was the car door. Never wrote about it. Never mentioned it one time in a letter. Never said anything about it in a letter because he did it before and after. That's interesting. I wonder, like, yeah, would have been. Yeah, that's a could be. I don't think Grayson's done much in a while. I want to see Reed shooting Zodiac. I know Neil's checking that out. That's probably true, Steven. Unless they get a DNA. Yeah, that's what people are going for. Like Jody Angelo. Of course, people thought, why don't we have that here? Because Zodiac wasn't a rapist and didn't leave a ton of DNA. He just didn't. I mean, you have letters that may or may not very organized, Lisa. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you just don't have that great DNA sample that you can do a genetic genealogy on. Of course, I want to talk to David Middleman about that because he's the master at taking small samples and making them bigger. So there's some hope with work like Othram's doing in making these small DNA samples bigger. If they could find something that hasn't been just contaminated by the police over all these years and families taking home the bindings, I don't have much hope for because you see people barehanding them and the rest of all this crap. But I don't know. But that's it for tonight. I'm glad everybody tuned in. I didn't even expect I was going to be able to go this long, but everybody has all these great questions. But yeah, Gary Post is still not the Zodiac. He's still the worst suspect ever put forward. I think the Monster of Florence theory is better than Gary Post, as bad as that was. And I know the History Channel show on DB Cooper wasn't. We didn't go near as bad on that as they did on the Zodiac show going into the Monster of Florence. No one had. Yeah, no one had knowledge of DNA back then. Uh, no, but you'd have to, without you'd have to have left it on saliva and stamps or something, and obviously they haven't figured that out. It's just a mess. The SFPD crime lab is an absolute laughing stock and a joke. The way they stored their material, they claim to get one good sample from the 78 letter, which is not even confirmed Zodiac letter. Who knows? It was Geraldo Rivera. Thanks, Patty. Thanks everybody for tuning in.